Welcome, and thank you for this opportunity to share the story of our journey. We hope you'll find it engaging and inspiring. My name is Harvey Harrison. I'm a longtime member of First Unitarian Church in Des Moines. Following my graduation from the University of Iowa Law School, I had a general civil law practice in Des Moines until my retirement in 2011. Since my retirement, I've focused my energies on derailing the racially discriminatory cradle-to-prison pipeline in public schools, the juvenile courts, the adult criminal courts, and the justice system in Des Moines, Iowa. I founded the nonprofit corporation Just Voices in 2019. Lori?
Thank you, Harvey. Hello, General Assembly. I'm Lori Young, and I serve as a Communications and Operations Director for Just Voices. And I had the good fortune of meeting Harvey in the summer of 2018 while volunteering on racial justice and policing with an organization called Iowa CCI. I'm a native of Des Moines, Iowa, and a graduate of Grandview University. After college, I spent 28 years in corporate America, working mainly on retirements, investment, and marketing communications. But my passion has always been for social and racial justice. So I did that in my spare time as a volunteer, and now it's my full-time job. And it's great to be with you today. Harvey, let's get started.
Thanks, Lori. Michelle Alexander, who's the author of The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, provides an excellent framework for what we're going to be talking about for this next period of time. And here's what she says. In the era of colorblindness, it is no longer socially permissible to use race explicitly as a justification for discrimination, exclusion, and social contempt. So we don't. Rather than rely on race, we use our criminal justice system to label people of color criminals, and then engage in all the practices we supposedly left behind. Today, it is perfectly legal to discriminate against criminals in nearly all the ways it was once legal to discriminate against African Americans. Once you're labeled a felon, the old forms of discrimination, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, denial of the right to vote, denial of educational opportunity, denial of food stamps and other public benefits, and exclusion from jury service are suddenly legal. As a criminal, you have scarcely more rights and arguably less respect than a Black man living in Alabama at the height of Jim Crow. We've not ended racial caste in America, we have merely redesigned it. During the workshop, there's going to be opportunities to post questions and comments in the chat section. And while we won't be able to answer the questions directly during our presentation, we will be delighted to do so if you will leave the question and your email address so that we can get back to you. In addition, if you're attending General Assembly in person, I've arranged for an in-person meeting at 1:00 p.m. on Friday afternoon, June 23rd, in Convention Center Room 324. I will be available to sit down and directly answer questions and provide additional information about our work. And finally, from time to time, you will see the links to videos that we will show. Please know that these links are listed in the resource sheet you'll find on the General Assembly website, where you accessed this presentation. Simply download it from there. And as we start, we're going to take a few minutes to share with you more about Just Voices. Lori?
Thank you, Harvey. Basically, Just Voices Iowa is a small nonprofit activist and advocacy organization based here in Des Moines, Iowa. We're proud to say that we're a recipient of a grant from Borealis Foundation's Communities Transforming Policing Fund. And to give you a good introduction of who we are and what we do, we've got a video to show you. It's about 5 minutes in length. Now, I want to forewarn you that this video has some historic images that may be difficult or disturbing for some to watch. And I should also note that this is our general branding video for Just Voices. So at the end, there is a request for donations. near the end of the video. Please ignore that. And so let's watch the video together about Just Voices. May take a moment to load. Here we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Founded as a nonprofit in 2019 and supported by private donations and grants from organizations like the Borealis Foundation, our mission is to build a platform that educates, advocates, and collaborates to end racially biased policing in Des Moines and across Iowa. Here's how we do it. Data is collected from records received from the Des Moines Police Department, Iowa Department of Transportation, and the Polk County Sheriff's Office. The data is analyzed and translated into language the public can understand. Just Voices has interviewed dozens of Black residents over the years. They share their firsthand stories of being stopped, illegally searched, and unjustly detained.
Then at that very moment, I knew that for whatever reason that we were going to be pulled over and stopped.
We share the data and stories we've collected through presentations to church groups, colleges and universities, neighborhood associations, and other activist organizations. Our 2020 study of the Special Enforcement Team showed how the Des Moines Police Department used racially biased policing to target people of color. Our most ambitious project to date is The People's History, a research project on the Des Moines, Iowa protests during the summer of 2020. We advocate to city and state officials on the issues of racially biased policing by providing them with in-house and national research and by dialogue when possible. In only a few short years, Just Voices has become a respected member of the racial and social justice community of Des Moines. Because we can't do this alone, we've collaborated with the ACLU of Iowa, Iowa CCI, Surge Des Moines, BLM DSM, and the local NAACP to share ideas, develop strategies, and build power. Our social media platforms allow us to reach and engage with all of our followers. Working with others in the activist community, we were instrumental in winning hard-fought victories in recent years. These include, but certainly aren't limited to, the passage of an anti-racial profiling ordinance by the city of Des Moines, annual de-escalation training by the Des Moines Police Department, uncovering videos of police violence perpetrated by Des Moines policemen. After years of racially biased policing and losing millions in excessive force lawsuits, Just Voices, along with other activist organizations, influenced the city council to retain a consulting firm.
Sorry about that. I was admitting someone into the room and it stopped the video.
policing and losing millions in excessive force lawsuits, Just Voices, along with other activist organizations, influenced the city council to retain a consulting firm that specializes in turning around troubled police departments. As you can see, we're actively working toward our vision to realize a society free from racial oppression. We're doing our part, but we need your help. Our annual operations budget is over $125,000. We need financial support from grantors, private donations, and corporate donations in order to continue this valuable work. So give generously. We need volunteers to work on the important projects that make a difference. And lastly, we need to hear from you. If you or someone you know have been the victim of racially biased policing, use your voice. Share your story. One of the best ways to fight racism is exposure. Get in touch with us today. We can be reached on any of our social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Thank you so much for your time. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
So in essence, thank you for watching that. In essence, Just Voices grew out of the efforts of the activist community in Des Moines to end racially biased policing. As the video stated, our mission is to build a platform that educates, advocates, and collaborates to end racially biased policing in Des Moines and across Iowa. Our ultimate vision is to see a society that is free from racial oppression. With a small staff and a handful of paid professional contractors, a team of dedicated advisors, and a small group of community volunteers, we work toward our mission in 4 distinct but equally important ways. Data collection. We have collected and studied data on policing in Des Moines for nearly 8 years, ever since 2014. Through Freedom of Information Act requests, we have gathered over 500,000 data points from the Des Moines Police, the Sheriff's Office, the Iowa DOT, and others. We have data on traffic stops, bookings, arrests, all analyzed by our PhD mathematician, who is a volunteer. We then translate that data into understandable conclusions which show the grave racial disparity. Secondly, we share stories. We search for and we find real-life first-person stories of victims of racially biased policing in Des Moines. We interview them if they're willing and share their stories on our website. We also assist them in filing complaints against the Des Moines Police Department, and we will refer them on to legal representation if warranted. Through our social media marketing and through our allies, victims of racially biased policing often come to us unsolicited. We make sure to respect and listen to their voices and lift them up. We not only share the details of what happened with them with our city's residents, but more importantly, we share the impact, the trauma that they tell us that they've experienced. Third, as mentioned, part of our mission is to educate. So we regularly make presentations like this one to a wide range of organizations. Our goal in this part of our work is to raise consciousness about the nature of racial bias in policing in our country that moves beyond the headlines and inspires people like you to join in the growing movement to transform policing from its history of slave patrols to a 21st century model of public safety and service. And finally, we do special research. We do intensive research projects such as a report on marijuana enforcement and our current project, The People's History of the 2020 Protests. Basically, this is our version of an after-action review. Again, we have been collecting the data and interviewing protesters for their stories. We're telling the entire truth of what happened to people who peacefully protested during the summer of 2020 here in Des Moines following George Floyd's murder. So every piece of data we analyze and every story we tell, every study that we release is shared with the community in an effort to engage them and engage a wide range of people in this work. Ultimately, we're working for real systemic police reform and improved public safety through advocacy, collaboration, and education. Next, Harvey is going to share and give you a little bit of background on Des Moines, Iowa, the capital of Iowa. Harvey?
Thanks, Lori. Glad we got that out of the way early on so that we get the rest of it. We knew we weren't going to do it without some kind of a faux pas in the middle of all of this.
Bound to happen.
Yeah. Des Moines is the capital city of Iowa with a population of about 213,000 residents. When you factor in neighboring suburban cities, that number jumps to about 700,000. Des Moines, as the state's largest city, also has the largest population of Black residents at about 12% or 25,000. Like most American cities, racially biased policing is an issue in Des Moines and in Iowa. From the beginning of our work, public officials, and particularly our chief of police, have denied the existence of racially biased policing as a problem. And that's in spite of the overwhelming evidence that has been presented to our chief and to other city officials. All of them have refused to have any serious conversations with the activist community about the need for change, and they have stonewalled and aggressively resisted those steps where actual progress could have been made. This denial and resistance continues to the present moment. As we begin to look at the issue of racial bias in policing, I believe it's always useful to share the following data point, which I believe cannot be shared in presentations like this too many times. And that point is that we in the United States imprison a larger percentage of our population than any other country in the world, including countries that we think of as repressive dictatorships. The people that we incarcerate are disproportionately people of color, primarily African-American men. This disproportionality is based upon a false narrative of Black criminality. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is a well-known author, points out that our current carceral system is not broken, which is what many people propose. He declares that it is functioning exactly as it is designed to function and as it is intended to function, that it is based upon the false trope of Black criminality, the narrative that Blacks and particularly young Black men are inherently criminals. This false narrative is one of the barriers interfering with our ability to make necessary changes in police practices. You can listen and watch a video by Mr. Coates on YouTube at the link that is shown in the screen, and the link is in the resource guide. This false narrative of Black criminality has been used as the engine for mass incarceration in our country, whereby we have moved from about 300,000 people in all the jails and prisons in 1970 to over 2 million today. And we have another 4.5 million people on probation or on parole. And the people who are imprisoned are primarily Black and male. In the state of Iowa, which has approximately 3 million people, the Black population represents just less than 4% of the total population. And in spite of this, 25% of the people in our prisons in this state are Black. Iowa, in many news papers and other journals, is cited as a good place to live. And this is largely true if you are white. If you are Black or brown, however, it turns out that Iowa and Des Moines are among the worst places in the United States to live. And racially biased policing is one of the reasons for that. We're going to show you something now that is an example from an actual police stop in Des Moines. And Lori is going to explain that and show you the video. Lori?
Thanks, Harvey. Basically, in 2018, in Des Moines, Iowa, two young Black men in their early 20s were stopped by police on a warm summer evening. Montre Little and Jared Clinton are their names. That stop by two white Des Moines police officers is an example of what Black people in our city deal with on a daily basis. It is the lived reality for Blacks in Des Moines. We're going to show you a video from that stop. Now, it's important to understand that these two young men had not committed any crime. Neither one had ever been in trouble with authorities. They were in a rented car, so there was no history around the car. They had not violated any traffic laws of any kind prior to the stop. But in spite of that, Officer Thies and Officer Heineman pulled them over and conducted an investigatory stop. As you watch, I want you to pay attention to a number of things and just jot down your own thoughts and your reactions to what you are seeing. You can share your thoughts or reactions in the chat if you'd like. But in particular, I want you to note the following. Note the initial questions that Officer Thies asked Montre. Note the lies that he uses to generate a search of their persons and the vehicle. Ask yourself, what is the reason for handcuffing Montre? Note the implied threat from Officer Heineman to Jared about running. Note the body search. And pay close attention to Officer Thies' comments as he gets back into his police vehicle.
What's going on, guys?
Not much.
What's up?
How you doing, officer?
Is this your car?
Well, it's a rental right now. My car's in the shop.
Okay. Did something break down?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. You guys just came from over at the park, right?
Yeah, we're just hanging out.
That's it?
Well, that's what we're doing.
Is this your car?
I just told you my car's in the shop, officer. This is a rental.
Okay. How do you start it?
What do you mean? I just put my foot on the brake and I put it in drive and I
Okay.
drive, officer.
So it's your car, though? Did they give you a fob or something?
It's not my car, officer.
Did they give you a key fob or something? Or
Yes, sir. Officer.
like, what does it do? Does it?
You see, that should let you know that it's in.
Okay. Do you have any weapons on you or in the car?
No, officer.
Okay. Can I be honest with you? It smells like marijuana in the car, and I can see shake on the ground. And your buddy's giving me the idea that maybe he's got a gun. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think.
How?
I don't know. Just the way. I mean, just the way you're holding yourself, man. Like, that's why we're nervous, man. That's it. I mean, if you're scared because you got a little bit of weed, that'll be one thing.
Officer,
Okay.
there's no weed.
Okay.
There's no shake on the floor.
Okay. So there's no shake on the floor.
Officer,
Okay. All right. And you don't have any weapons on you, you said?
officer, that is correct.
Okay. Do you have your ID on you?
Why don't you want to get pulled over by the police?
My brother's been pulled over multiple times for doing that for me. I live in Des Moines, I go to work. I don't like doing it.
Okay. You don't got no weapons on you?
Officer, no, sir.
Go ahead and step out, Montre. Yep, I just told you why. 3 times. You want me to recap again?
Officer, look, my hands is up.
Yep, your hands are up, and now I'm asking you to step out of the car.
I gave you my ID.
You gave me your ID.
Go run it.
Yep, I don't want to. I'm not walking away from this car.
Officer, can I ask you why?
Yep, because I just told you. Step out of the car. If you don't want to go to jail, I would expect you to please listen. I mean, I told you I'm a cop. Face the car when you step out. Face the car when you step out. Face the car when you step out. Don't flex. Don't flex. I don't know what you're doing, man, but you need to knock that off. Stop pulling on your arms. What's going on, dude? Where are you trying to? What are you doing, dude?
Officer, I'm not doing nothing to you.
Okay. Well, you're making me think something funny's going on, man.
Come on, man.
You're not under arrest. You're just
You're
like pulling away like you're gonna do something silly, and I don't want that. What?
Nothing.
What?
I'm not even gonna.
Okay. Well, you're not under arrest, man. We're just trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so slide over here. I mean, your heart is thumping, dude. Like you're beaten.
Officer, please don't.
Don't what? Have a seat. Have a seat. I think that your buddy has a gun, so I need you to step in the car.
You think my buddy has a gun?
He's acting funny. Step in the car, please.
Officer,
if you don't step in the car, you're going to jail for sure.
Okay, that's
so
fine,
step
officer.
in the car. So step in the car.
Listen.
I'm done listening. I just told you I think that your buddy has a gun. Now knock it off.
No, have a great night.
All right, thank you guys.
I feel like I was missing something.
Officer Thies's final comments, if you didn't hear them as he got back in his squad car, was, I feel like I missed something. Harvey's going to talk about, kind of debrief the video for us. Harvey?
Thanks, Lori. The two police officers made the stop because they believed, no, they knew they would find contraband, most likely a gun and marijuana, just because these young men were Black. They were absolutely sure that these two young men had to be doing something illegal. This incident is a perfect example of how mass incarceration plays out at the tip of the justice system spear with the police. The assumption by the police of the criminality of young Black men, it is what Alexander and Coates are talking about. So ask yourself, what was wrong with the traffic stop? Well, let's look at least a couple of the pieces of it. First, it was based upon racial profiling, not the actual observation of any crime. The stop was pretextual. And in this instance, there wasn't actually even a pretext other than these guys had been coming out of the park. The search and the handcuffing of Montre was unjustified. Officers were not at any risk. The officers used old tropes, which were common in policing and still are, such as, I smell marijuana. There was none, and there was no smell. One officer accused Montre of resisting, which of course he wasn't. And the female officer asked Jared, you're not going to run, are you? Which of course in our period of time is a direct threat. The officers then also falsely claimed, your buddy looks like he's got a gun. And of course, once again, that was simply nonsense. The video demonstrates what the Black community was experiencing. It proved the need for transformative police reform. It is important to note at this juncture that during the stop, there was no citation issued because there was no crime. There was no warning issued and no arrest made. In Des Moines at that time, there would have been no record of the stop at all had Jared's mother, a local racial justice activist, not immediately requested the body camera and dash cam footage from the police department. And when the activist community looked at this, it became the smoking gun that we had been looking for since the beginning of our work in 2014. This stop led to a lawsuit against the city, the first in a series, and a $75,000 settlement in favor of the two young men. Lori's now going to describe the work that the activist community was doing during this same time frame, work that helped us prepare to respond to this incident and incidents like it, and which has set the stage for the work that we have been doing since the summer of 2018. Lori?
Thank you, Harvey. By the spring of 2018, the activist community had become increasingly frustrated by the lack of response from our public officials. As a result of that frustration, Iowa CCI organized a series of 3 community meetings during the summer of 2018. City council members and the public especially were invited to attend these meetings. During the meetings, Black members of the community shared their stories of the lived experience of what it meant to be Black and be a resident of Des Moines, and subjected to the ongoing racial profiling and other racially biased law enforcement. Over 400 people attended these meetings. By the fall of 2018, as a result of this series of summer meetings, a list of 6 initiatives was prepared and submitted to the Des Moines City Council. The 6 community-generated initiatives were: the community asked for a ban on racial profiling to stop the stops, the unnecessary traffic stops. Number 2, the community demanded a ban on pretextual stops, for police to stop using small vehicle infractions to stop the Black and brown motorists. The community was demanding a community review board because police cannot police themselves. Number 4 was to provide de-escalation and implicit bias training on an annual basis. Number 5, the community was asking that the police would provide data on all stops, not just the ones where a ticket is issued or an arrest is made, and share that data with the public. And finally, the 6th demand was to make marijuana a low priority for law enforcement. These 2 events, the community meetings and the wrongful stop of Jared and Montre, were the turning point in our efforts to make systemic changes in policing in Des Moines. Harvey, would you talk about what happened next?
Absolutely. Delay, delay, delay. During the following 1.5 years, none of the initiatives were adopted or even seriously considered by our chief of police, the city manager, or the city council. We faced constant delays and a refusal to engage in real dialogue. During that time, the lawsuit was settled and the activist community continued to demand changes, and we began the preparation of documents to support the 6 demands, including writing a proposed ordinance to ban racial profiling. Everything changed in May 25th of 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. The outraged response that occurred nationally was also reflected in Des Moines. The city council meeting that occurred immediately after the murder was attended in person and virtually by over 1,300 people. That was unprecedented. During the following days and weeks, over 80 protests occurred in Des Moines, mostly peaceful. Because of the extraordinary outpouring of community protest in the aftermath of the murder, the Des Moines City Council, at its 2nd meeting in June, actually adopted the proposed ordinance to ban racial profiling, an ordinance that was based on the draft document that the activist community had been working on and demanding for months. The council also adopted a requirement for annual de-escalation training and established a marijuana task force to study and report back on the possibilities of reducing marijuana enforcement in Des Moines. While the ordinance didn't include all 6 points, it was the basis for these actions and it was a start. The response from the Des Moines Police Department to the protests was very much like police responses many places around the United States. It was also what could be expected from an overly militarized police that were absolutely unprepared to respond appropriately to this public outpouring of grief and anger. We have a video clip that shows one example of what the response looked like in Des Moines. What you are going to see in the following security camera footage from a bar occurred on June 1 of 2020 in the aftermath of a large gathering of protesters at the steps of the Iowa Capitol on the east side of Des Moines. The nonviolent protest was broken up by utilizing tear gas and force. People were fleeing away from the Capitol building, moving toward the heart of Des Moines. Here's how Police Sergeant House described the police action that followed. And this is his words in a quote. "We had just assisted in pushing the rioters off the Capitol grounds, and they went west down Locust. We were attempting to parallel them on Grand and turned north on East 6th. As we did so, my driver, Officer Escobar, looked over at a group moving quickly on the west sidewalk northbound. He shouted that they had Molotov cocktails. They didn't, by the way, and I told him to stop. Running around the truck, I pointed my rifle at them and ordered them on the ground. 3 of them ran into the blazing saddle, and I ordered my guys after them." The video we're now going to show you is silent, and the words that you will hear me speaking are a part of the description by one of the men helping at the bar that evening. So Lori, would you go ahead and start to run the video? Here's his words. "Just prior to midnight on Monday, June 1, 2020, we had been watching the protest at the Capitol building, only blocks away from our location. On the news, when it was starting to break up and the protesters were asked to disperse, we then saw on TV that the crowd was getting tear gassed. 3 of our people were prepared with a backpack full of first aid supplies, and we went outside in case anyone would be in need of assistance post-protest. We also had bottles of water and towels available for use if needed. Foot and vehicle traffic started to pick up in our area with protesters marching and running, as well as police presence following them down Locust and East 5th Street. An unmarked white pickup containing numerous officers in riot gear turned onto our street. Many of the people on foot started running, and our people with first aid supplies were heading back to the saddle from the alley. At this point, the police disembarked from the pickup bed, guns pointed, and proceeded to put the 3 on the ground. The rest of us, 4 others, entered the building and locked the door as the police came at us. We were told to unlock the door, and 3 of us were told to come outside while 1 had run to hide. As they held us at the front door with guns, 2 officers went into the bar to make sure, it was clear. They found our 4th person and thoroughly frisked them before bringing them outside. Then the officers continued to sweep the bar looking for others. The 3 on the ground were then cuffed face down on the sidewalk and asked what was in the backpack. As one of them listed the contents of the bag, an officer went through the bag, then removed the spray bottles of diluted MOM and baking soda to combat tear gas effects, and a pair of safety scissors for removing clothing. They then were sat on the bench out in front of the bar as the rest of us were told to return back inside and lock the door. They were asked questions and then taken away to jail by the police. All the while, other actual protesters were allowed to leave without incident." You want to stop the video at that point, Lori? This unprovoked action led to the arrest of 3 people who had been providing medical assistance to people who had been gassed or injured by the actions of the Des Moines police who broke up the peaceful protest. After the county attorney reviewed the charges against the 3 young men who had been arrested, all charges were dismissed. A civil lawsuit was filed against the police department for their actions, and that lawsuit is still pending. What I'd like you to do at this moment is to share your reflections and reactions to what you have just seen in the chat. And as you do that, Lori and I want to move forward on our journey and begin to share with you some of the steps that have been taken as a result of the activist community and the impact that the protests had on our efforts to reform policing. One example of that was the work of a specially appointed marijuana task force, which we've commented on. Lori, would you share that story?
Absolutely. So once the marijuana task force was created, Just Voices actively engaged with them by providing them with data that we had been collecting and references to resources that are available describing the reality of marijuana enforcement in the United States, including reports of the ACLU. So the task force did an exemplary job, and they reported back in a timely manner with recommendations on changes that could be made within the constraints of Iowa law. We have provided links to the report in the material on the resource guide and that we have prepared for you. The Des Moines Police Chief publicly stated, however, that even if the council adopted the recommendations from the task force, so long as marijuana use was illegal in Iowa, his officers would enforce the law to the full extent. So none of the recommendations of the task force were ever adopted. And that's an example of what we face often in our efforts to make change. Nonetheless, we keep the pressure on. Although the City Council took a significant step in the summer of 2020, it became clear very quickly that it was going to take ongoing pressure and organization of the activist community. The Chief of Police, the City Manager, and the City Council were unwilling to move forward with some of those key elements that the community had originally demanded in 2018, which were, we wanted a Citizens Review Board to be established. We still want a ban on pretextual stops. And of course, making marijuana possession a low-level law enforcement priority. In other words, the possibility of true systemic change was still a distant goal. So Harvey, would you talk about how we used document requests as part of our response to the stonewalling that we were experiencing?
Thanks, Lori. Once it became clear in 2018 that the Des Moines City Council had no intention of moving forward with any progressive changes in how policing was done in Des Moines, and as a corollary to the creation and publication of the 6-point initiative created by the community under CCI's leadership, I started filing Freedom of Information Act requests with the police department, the city manager's office, the Iowa Department of Transportation, the Polk County Sheriff, and others. I did this because the city of Des Moines was not collecting nor critically analyzing data. There was no internal process in place to collect complete data on all stops and then to analyze that information and utilize it. In other words, the police were not collecting information on all stops that they were making. So if they did not issue a citation nor make an arrest, there was no statistical record or evidence of the stop being made. And the perfect example of this was the Monterey Little Jared Clinton stop. Had Jared and his mother not obtained the body cam and dash cam recordings of the incident, there was no way that there would have been a record in the data that I was collecting and analyzing. This created and continues to create a huge gap in trying to analyze the full functioning of the police. In analyzing the data that we have collected, Just Voices has had the good fortune of being helped by a semi-retired mathematics PhD who specializes in the aggregation and evaluation of data. The charts that you will see on our website have been produced by him from the data that we've collected. And while the data encompasses a large range of activities by the Des Moines Police Department, we have focused much of the reporting on the utilization of traffic citation data and data on low-level drug enforcement, particularly marijuana. We did this as a way of directly addressing the narrative of Black criminality. We know from many studies that marijuana usage is consistent across all demographic categories and that Black, white, and brown drivers all drive the same. This means that if the data shows significant racial disparities in enforcement, which it does, one likely cause of that difference is racially biased policing. And Lori's going to talk for a few minutes now about one of those infractions, speeding charges. Lori?
Thanks, Harvey. What you are looking at now on your screen is our analysis of outcomes on speeding citations from January 2016 to December 31, 2020. This is what we call a probability chart. And what it tells us is as appalling as it is interesting. It says that if you're a black person driving in Des Moines, you are 2.3 times more likely to be stopped for speeding than if you're a white driver. And once stopped and ticketed, it also shows that black drivers are 4.5 times more likely to be arrested for some charge. Once stopped and ticketed for speeding, black people are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for possession of a controlled substance. And once stopped and ticketed for speeding, black residents are 7.3 times more likely to be arrested for interference with official acts, one of the common charges they tag on. Harvey, why don't you share the data that we've collected on marijuana enforcement?
Absolutely. As we said, the two charges that should be demographically the same, speeding and marijuana. The chart you're looking at now, or at least the screen you're looking at now, was the cover page on the report that we did on enforcement and marijuana. And this was produced as a part of our research on the special enforcement team in Des Moines. The SET unit was a small group of 8 to 10 officers charged with looking for drugs and weapons during the summer months from April through September. We did a study of the actions of this unit from 2016 through 2020. The depth of this study was made possible by the fact that this unit was required to keep data on all stops, every one of them, unlike the balance of the force. This created reports every day and each week that set out the details of every stop and reported on the amounts of contraband, largely drugs and guns, collected as a result of the stops. This level of detail was not, and as I've said before, still not available for any other unit in the Des Moines Police Department. What the data exposed and what you can see on this chart is that this unit made over 6,500 stops in the 5 years that we studied. It collected marijuana only 299 times in those stops, meaning that contraband in the form of marijuana was found in about 4.5% of the stops. So think about that for a moment. It's one of the reasons, of course, that we've started to oppose all of these stops. The data also shows that the median amount of marijuana found was right at 3 grams. Now, they kept track literally of the weight of all of the marijuana that they seized. Well, 3 grams is the size of an average tea bag. Finally, the data showed that 61% of all arrests by the SET unit were of blacks, supporting the community's claim of over-policing and racial bias in enforcement. Needless to say, the Des Moines Police Department did not accept our data and attacked the report itself. But it is interesting to note that this special unit has not been activated since the release of our report early in 2021, and the actual level of marijuana arrests has plummeted since somewhere in 2018 when we started actually actively engaging the police department with our research. Doing our own research and exposing this gaping racial disparity is one strategy we've used to advocate for police reform. Lori's going to talk about how we've influenced and operated in the realm excuse me, of political engagement following George Floyd's murder. Lori?
Thanks, Harvey. The murder of George Floyd also triggered a new interest in political engagement by a number of people and organizations, including the Black Liberation Movement in Des Moines. In 2021 municipal elections, a 26-year-old member of the Black Liberation Movement, Indira Shoemaker, ran for a seat on the city council. One of our strongest allies, Iowa CCI, which includes a 501c4 organization, supported Indira by providing an endorsement to her campaign and assisting with phone banking and door knocking. In other words, grassroots politics. She defeated the incumbent member of the council who was absolutely opposed to any progressive changes that were being demanded by the activist community. Her victory provided us with a 4th vote on the city council, which has been helpful as we have been moving forward with our demands. It is noteworthy as well that Ms. Schumacher is the first Black person and the youngest person ever elected to the Des Moines City Council at the ripe old age of 26. She was and still is one of the organizers of the Black Liberation Movement in Des Moines, and she was able to defeat the incumbent white male. We consider Ms. Shoemaker an ally as we try to solidify a total of 4 council reps who are in alignment with our demands and thereby garner a majority vote of 4-3 on the council. Harvey, would you talk about our most current political success that we've experienced?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lori. We had a stroke of good luck in the last 2 years. The longtime county attorney in Polk County, Iowa, which encompasses Des Moines, decided to retire. He was an extremely popular county attorney and was essentially unbeatable in the election process. He was also an old school prosecutor who believed and adopted the philosophy of do the crime, do the time. His retirement opened the door to a change agent in that office. The activist community, led by CCI, provided support to a progressive candidate who promised and has actually started implementing some progressive reforms, including a refusal to prosecute low-level marijuana charges. Kimberly Graham is her name, and she's a strong proponent of not prosecuting people with low-level marijuana possession and shifting those resources to prosecution of serious crimes. She hopes to end cash bail for nonviolent, low-level offenses. And finally, in order to protect our future generations, Ms. Graham also feels it is time to stop unnecessary prosecution of kids and keep them out of the system whenever possible by implementing evidence-based diversion and restorative justice programs. Another strategy we've used to get change is by elevating the issue of the police budget. And Lori is going to explain a little bit more about what we're doing around that. Lori?
Thanks, Harvey. Just Voices has added another new focus to our work, triggered by the national movement for Black Lives, their demand to defund the police. Some activists support this extreme position, and others have a more moderate position. As for Just Voices, we've made it quite clear to the community and city leaders that we do not support defunding the police. However, most in the activist community in Des Moines do support a close examination of the Des Moines Police Department budget. There may be better uses for some of those dollars that could improve public safety. So, true to form, if the city won't study the police budget, Just Voices will. And it has been an eye-opening experience so far. It has offered us yet one more way to advocate for police reform. In exploring the Des Moines Police Department budget, we've been consulting with a company called Civilytics. Civilytics Consulting, just for some background, is a data science consulting firm. They were founded in 2016. They provide data science software solutions, social science research and analysis, and training in higher education, K-12 education, criminal justice, and public finance sectors. You can check them out for yourselves at civilytics.com. Based on the information provided by Civilytics and our own research, we have a new ask of our Des Moines City Council and city leaders. We are asking that for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, that they freeze the police budget at its current level and initiate an in-depth study of how we are spending public money on policing. So Just Voices attended a public hearing recently on the budget, and we made our ask of the City Council. Needless to say, the City Council ignored our request and went ahead and adopted the proposal that it had received from the city manager. And that was not a surprise, and it was an outcome that we did in fact expect. But Harvey's going to share some more interesting things that we've learned about our police department's budget and how it's informing our demand for police reform. Harvey?
Thanks, Lori. What you're looking at now is a graph produced by Civilytics that demonstrates the increase in the per capita cost of policing against other public services that are needed since the initiation of the war on drugs. And it, I think, very vividly shows what we're dealing with in the request for starting to reallocate some of those resources back into other public needs. So the power of the new initiative flows from this analysis that was provided to us by Civilytics. It rests upon the premise that as a result of the war on drugs and the political fearmongers who have promoted this phony war, we have in the United States created militarized policing across America and moved away from true community policing. And we've also in this time added duties and responsibilities to the portfolio of the police department that will be better performed and less expensively be performed by non-police personnel. This portion of our research and advocacy is relatively new, but it is what we already, this is what we already know from the research that we've done over the past now about 5 months that we've actually been doing this. Since 1970, the population in Des Moines has grown by about 7%. In that same time frame, the police budget has grown from just over $4 million to $81 million. In other words, 19 times. Our police department has become, like many around the United States, more militarized with no improvement in public safety, while other city agencies have been starved for resources. When you look at the police budget now, it consumes about 37% of all general fund expenditures, more than any other city department. It funds an overpriced, militarized police department that is not focused on public safety, and it starves other city departments of increased funding to provide important community and human resources. We have just had a study released on the needs, for example, for housing for those people who are poor. And the budget refuses to continue to and continues to refuse to embrace transparency and accountability. It's way too early for us to know how much traction this added element of our advocacy will lend to the overall demands for police reforms. So what we're going to do now is we're going to shift the focus to some of the victories as we begin to wind down this presentation. It's important in this work to celebrate the wins, no matter how small and infrequent they feel. Lori?
That's right, Harvey. We've got to take time to celebrate our victories. The quote on the screen reads, "Little victories lead to bigger victories that affects the battles that eventually win the war. Winning begins small." Just Voices has been committed and heavily involved in meetings with the city council and city leadership since the passing of that ordinance in 2020. Staying focused on our strategies and next steps, we don't take time to celebrate the wins along the way. And a win is not always the big bang. And when dealing with politicians, quite frankly, it's a hard fight. At times we must step back and realize that we have won. We know there would have been absolutely no movement on the issue of racial profiling had it not been for the persistence of our community. And that was our first win. But here are some others. We have been successful in pressuring the city council into issuing a contract with Public Works LLC to study data collection practices by the Des Moines Police Department. Just Voices actively engaged with Public Works by providing access to the data that we've collected, connecting our PhD expert who produces our analytical reports with their PhD expert as part of the contract. As a result of that collaboration, demands that have been outstanding for years were incorporated into the final recommendations made by Public Works to the city of Des Moines. Public Works actually produced a report that made 23 specific recommendations for changes in data collection practices. Changes to make data more transparent and actionable. So in the upcoming 2023-2024 budget for the city of Des Moines, they are going to add IT and data collection experts to the city's staff. A working group has already been created to define and implement the recommendations made by Public Works. Just Voices will continue to engage the city as this process moves forward to ensure that the police department is collecting data on all stops and that the aggregation and evaluation of the data is provided in the most public fashion so that we can continue to use it to evaluate the racial justice or injustice of our police department. Now, our most practical success on data collection so far is an order from the Des Moines Chief of Police issued in October. Excuse me, I made a little mistake there. Our most practical success so far, most recently, is an order from the Chief of Police that was issued in October 2022 that now requires the creation of a written record on all traffic stops. Now, you'll recall that this was one of the major issues raised by the community in 2018. It has always been our opinion that the disparity in enforcement is greater than what the data showed. So now we should have more complete and accurate data to analyze for any racial disparities. And remember the third-party investigation of the Des Moines Police Department that the community was demanding? Well, our city has recently entered into a contract with 21st Century Policing to study the practices and the culture of the Des Moines Police Department, which is very important. So once again, Iowa CCI and Just Voices are actively engaging with 21st Century Policing to ensure that their report incorporates the demands that have been made by the community. One more example, Iowa CCI Action Fund asked one of our supportive council members to arrange a meeting with the Des Moines City Manager to discuss a draft of an ordinance that we wrote working with CCI to establish a citizens review board of the police department. Now that kind of meeting would not have been possible in the past. We're also about applying pressure and monitoring how our city leadership takes action on the 23 recommendations made by the consulting firm Public Works LLC to improve data collection by our police. We continue to use our voice and attend and speak out at city council meetings. We are committed to organizing the community and keeping them informed. Just Voices, along with Iowa CCI, holds periodic community meetings in person and on Zoom to update on progress and recruit the community's engagement in this work. We cannot do this without community involvement. And we're already exploring and trying to identify strong, diverse candidates to run for city council this fall. We want to increase the majority vote on the council, filling it with folks who understand and will fight for the progressive police reform our city desperately needs. Yes, we have shifted strategies more than once. We're like water flowing over rocks, and we maintain adaptability that we need to respond and react to changing conditions, and we change strategy when needed. There's no way you can do this work without being adaptable. As we close, we want to share some advice if you want to work towards racially equitable and just policing in your community. It's advice given by Brian Stevenson, the author of Just Mercy and the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. Harvey?
Brian Stevenson has done a lot of this work, and if you've visited the spaces down in Montgomery, Alabama, you know how powerful those are. And in one of his talks, he set out these 4 recommendations for people who are going to be involved in this work. And the first of those recommendations is get proximate. And there's 2 things that go with that. One, you've got to become a part of and a spokesperson for the communities that are actually oppressed, and especially in this racial justice work. And secondly, he also utilizes to some extent the thing that Teddy Roosevelt said of not being concerned about what critics might be saying, or as Brene Brown put it, she doesn't pay attention to those people who aren't in the arena getting their asses kicked. Second thing that he talks about is you got to change the narrative. And we've said that more than once during this presentation. This narrative, the trope of Black criminality, is one of those things that has to be changed. And that's a part of our work. You got to stay hopeful. There are mornings when I wake up and I'm thinking, oh my heavens to Betsy. When I started, I thought this was going to be 3 to 5 years. And that was 10 years ago now. And you got to be willing to move out of your comfort zone and do things that are uncomfortable and yet ethical and powerful. So Lori, you want to close us out?
Sure thing. Harvey and I may be highly critical and analytical and thoughtful of how the police in the United States and in Des Moines should go about their work. But we often tell people that our criticism of and our passion for police reform is not about hating the police. Dr. King said it well as anyone in his sermon, Loving Your Enemies. He said this: returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can. Thank you for listening today. Remember that you can send your questions directly to us by email at info@justvoicesiowa.org. Or also, you're invited to join Harvey in person during General Assembly on Friday, June 23rd at 1 p.m. in Convention Center, room 324. Thank you so much for listening and being with us today.